What if the fate of nation rested on the courage of one woman? A queen defied a king, and an empire trembled. From exile came an orphan, chosen to wear the crown. Plots in the shadows, deeds forgotten, until the night they returned. Pride turned to hatred, a people condemned. Would she stay silent and live, or speak and perish? A sleepless king, a schemer exposed, the gallows reversed. What was meant for their end became their deliverance. The day of dread became a feast of life. This is not just her story. It could be yours for such a time as this. If this story inspires you, join us, like, share, and subscribe, and walk with us through the greatest stories ever told. What if the fall of an empire began, not with a battle, not with an army, but with the defiance of a single woman? One refusal, one act of courage, a king's pride shattered, and in that silence, the stage was set for God's hidden plan. In the days of King Xerxes, who ruled over 127 provinces from India to Ethiopia, his throne towered in Susa, the jewel of Persia's empire. To display his greatness, he held a banquet that lasted 180 days, summoning nobles and generals from across his dominion. Marble pillars rose above them, gold gleamed around them, and wine flowed without measure. It was not a feast of hunger, but of pride, designed to leave every guest drunk on the power of their king. When those days ended, Xerxes opened the palace gates to all the people of Susa, holding a 7-day feast in the garden courtyard. The city poured in, men in one hall, women in another. And while the wine never ceased, Queen Vashti presided over her own banquet in the palace. But on the 7th day, when the king's heart was swollen with drink and arrogance, he gave a command not to honor his queen, but to parade her before a drunken crowd.
Bring Vashti, crown on her head. Let every man see her beauty.
The order raced through the corridors until it reached the queen. Yet what the king expected as obedience was met instead with silence, and then with defiance.
I will not come.
3 words that cracked the grandeur of Persia like a fault line under stone. The music faltered, the hall froze. The mighty Xerxes, the king of kings, stood publicly humiliated by the one meant to crown his pride. He was proud, he was drunk, he was defied. Would you risk everything to keep your dignity? Shame bled into fury, and Xerxes turned to his advisors. They whispered, their words sharpened by fear and calculation.
If this defiance is allowed, every woman in Persia will rise against her husband. Strip her crown, my lord. Send forth a decree. Let every man rule in his own house.
And so pride answered pride. A royal edict was written and carried across the empire in every language. Vashti was banished, her crown stripped, her name erased from the palace. The throne stood empty, waiting. No one saw it yet. But in the fall of one queen, God had already begun to move. Yet as the memory of Vashti's defiance faded, the absence of a queen still lingered in the palace. The throne beside Xerxes was empty, and his advisors, eager to soothe the king's pride, proposed a solution. Messengers were sent across the empire, from India to Ethiopia, to gather young women of beauty and strength. One would rise to take the crown. Among them was Hadassah, known in Persia as Esther. She was not born to power. She was an orphan raised by her cousin Mordecai, who loved her as his own daughter and reminded her often,
Even in this land, Never forget, you belong to God's people.
She had known loss. She had known silence. Yet in Mordecai's care she found belonging, and in her heart a quiet strength was being formed. When Esther was taken into the palace, she entered a world of marble halls and perfumes where women competed for favor. Some demanded jewels and silks to increase their beauty. But Esther asked for nothing more than what was given. Her humility became her crown before any crown touched her head. For 12 months she was refined with oils and treatments, preparing for the moment she would stand before the king. And when her time came, she did not dazzle with extravagance, but with grace.
She pleases me above all others.
The king placed the royal crown on Esther's head, and a banquet was declared in her honor. Gifts were sent across the provinces, and the empire rejoiced in its new queen. Yet even in her exaltation, she remembered Mordecai's words and kept her identity hidden. Her beauty was known, her crown was seen, but her truth remained concealed. She was chosen, she was loved, she was silent, and that silence carried the weight of destiny. But while Esther wore her crown in silence, Mordecai remained at the king's gate, a place of dust and business, where officials passed by and news flowed like a restless river. Day after day, he lingered there, faithful but unseen. One afternoon, as shadows lengthened across the palace wall, two of the king's guards drew near, their voices low, their words sharp with bitterness. They spoke of betrayal, of striking down Xerxes himself when the moment was right. What Mordecai overheard was not idle anger. It was a plot that could fracture an empire. Without delay, he sent word to Esther. She carried the warning to the king, naming Mordecai as the source. The plot was investigated, the truth uncovered, and justice was swift. The men were executed for treason. Yet when the danger had passed, the moment faded. Mordecai received no robe, no title, no honor. His name was simply written into the royal chronicles, a line of ink sealed among countless others. Mordecai asked for nothing. He had not sought glory, only to protect. But heaven had already marked the silence that men overlooked. The scrolls remembered. The ink waited. And destiny would one day awaken what was forgotten. Yet even as Mordecai's deed lay hidden in the chronicles, another figure was rising in the palace. Haman, exalted by Xerxes and clothed with authority, second only to the king. Wherever he walked, servants bowed low, their faces to the ground. His pride swelled with every gesture, for he demanded not just respect, but reverence. Yet at the king's gate, one man stood tall. Mordecai bowed to no one but the God of Israel. Day after day, others bent their knees, but he remained upright, his silence sharper than words. Haman saw. Haman burned. Haman plotted. When he learned Mordecai was a Jew, his fury spread beyond one man. Hatred twisted darker, and he schemed not only against Mordecai, but against every Jew scattered across the empire. With cunning words and a gift of silver, he bent the king's ear.
There is a certain people among the provinces. They live differently, and they do not keep your laws. It is not in the king's interest to tolerate them. Let them be destroyed.
Xerxes listened. With the weight of his signet ring, he sealed a decree of death. Couriers rode swiftly to every province, proclaiming in every language, on a single day, men, women, and children of Israel were to be annihilated. The empire shuddered. Susa itself fell into confusion. Across the lands, Jews clothed themselves in sackcloth and ashes. Their cries rose from the streets, mourning spreading like a shadow from province to province. What began with one man's pride became an empire's terror, and in the dust of sorrow, the Jews waited for deliverance. Among them was Mordecai, who clothed himself in sackcloth and ashes and wept at the gates of the palace. His grief was not hidden, his cries not restrained, and word of his mourning reached Esther inside the royal halls. She sent garments to clothe him, but he refused. Through a messenger, she learned the truth. Her people marked for annihilation, the day already set. And in that moment, the burden shifted to her shoulders. Silence meant safety. Speech could mean death.
Do not think that you will escape in the palace. If you remain silent, deliverance will come from somewhere else, but you and your father's house will perish. And who knows, perhaps you were born for such a time as this.
The word struck her like thunder. She was queen, yet powerless, exalted, yet endangered. To approach Xerxes without being summoned was to risk her life. One step into his throne room could end with her body carried away in silence. But she remembered Mordecai's care, the faith of her people, the God who had not abandoned them. And fear began to wrestle with courage in her heart.
Go, gather all the Jews in Susa. Fast for me, 3 days and 3 nights. I and my maids will fast as well. Then I will go to the king, though it is against the law. And if I perish, I perish.
So across the city, Jews laid aside food and comfort, bowing low in fasting and prayer. Their cries mingled in the night, their silence rising like incense. And Esther, once an orphan hidden in exile, now prepared to walk into the fire of destiny. She was afraid. She was resolved. She was chosen. And if this story moves you, take a moment to walk with us further. Like this video, share it with someone who needs courage, and subscribe so you won't miss the next story of faith and destiny. Together, we can keep these stories alive. And on the 3rd day, Esther dressed in royal robes and stood at the threshold of the king's inner court. Beyond the marble pillars, Xerxes sat on his throne, guarded and surrounded by officials. The law was clear. None who entered unbidden survived. One step forward could mean favor. One step forward could mean death. Her hands trembled, but her eyes did not falter. She crossed the floor in silence, every step echoing like a prayer. The hall seemed to hold its breath with her. Then the king looked up, his gaze fixed upon Esther. For a heartbeat, time itself stood still. Then, slowly, Xerxes lifted his hand and extended the golden scepter. Favor, not fury. Life, not death. Esther approached, touched the tip of the scepter, and bowed low. The king's voice broke the silence.
What is it, Queen Esther? What is your request? Even up to half the kingdom it will be granted.
But Esther did not yet plead for her people. With careful wisdom, she invited the king and Haman to a banquet she herself had prepared. The trap was not yet sprung. The stage was only being set. Her courage opened the door. Her patience prepared the table. And destiny waited for the banquet to begin. That evening, the king and Haman reclined at Esther's table. The banquet was rich, but Esther spoke no plea. When Xerxes pressed her, she only smiled and invited them to return the next day. The king left curious, Haman left swollen with pride, and Esther returned to her chambers waiting for the right moment. But that night, sleep fled from Xerxes. Wine and music could not quiet him, so he ordered the chronicles of his reign to be read aloud. Page after page passed until one entry stirred him awake. Mordecai, a plot uncovered, a king spared, but no reward given.
What honor has been bestowed upon this man?
Nothing, my lord. Nothing has been done for him.
At dawn, as the question still weighed heavy, Haman entered the court to ask for Mordecai's death. But before he could speak, Xerxes posed his own question. What should be done for the man the king delights to honor? Blinded by pride, Haman thought the words were for him. He imagined robes, the king's horse, and public acclaim. But the king commanded otherwise. Do this for Mordecai the Jew, leave nothing undone. Haman's face blanched. His heart crumbled. And yet he obeyed, leading his enemy through the city, proclaiming the honor he had once dreamed for himself. The gallows waited. The tables turned. And the hand of heaven moved in irony too sharp to ignore. The very next day, the king and Haman returned to Esther's table. The room was heavy with expectation. Xerxes leaned forward to hear her request, while Haman sat in pride, blind to the danger near him.
What is your request, Queen Esther? Speak, and it will be granted, even to half my kingdom.
Esther drew a breath, her courage rising. She was no longer just a queen, but a daughter of Israel standing for her people.
If I have found favor, O king, grant me my life and spare my people. For we have been fooled, to be destroyed, killed, and annihilated.
The king's face hardened, anger burning in his eyes.
Who is he? Where is the man who dares to do this?
Esther turned, her hand trembling but her voice firm. The enemy is this wicked man, Haman! The banquet froze. Haman's face went pale. The king stormed into the garden, furious and torn. Left behind, Haman collapsed in fear, begging for his life. When Xerxes returned, he saw Haman fallen on the couch where Esther sat. The guards seized him at once. The gallows he built for Mordecai became the place of his own death. The schemer was silenced, the enemy unmasked, and justice fell swift upon Haman. Yet even with Haman gone, the shadow of death remained. In Persia, no royal decree could be undone. The sentence of destruction still hung over the Jews, a day marked and sealed by law. The enemy was dead, but the danger remained. Once more Esther bowed before the king, pleading for her people.
Let my people be spared. Give us the right to stand against those who seek our lives.
Xerxes listened and placed his signet ring into Mordecai's hand.
Write in the king's name. Let it be done.
A new decree spread through the empire. The Jews were given the right to defend themselves. Couriers rode swiftly, carrying words of hope where mourning had once been. When the day came, fear turned against their enemies. Across the provinces, the Jews rose together, striking down those who sought their destruction. In Susa, 800 fell, including the 10 sons of Haman. Yet though victory was theirs, they took no plunder. Their fight was not for gain, but for survival. What was meant for their end became their deliverance. The day of dread became a day of triumph. And in the silence of history, God turned the tables. And so the day marked for death became a day of life. Fear gave way to joy. Across the provinces, the Jews rested from battle and turned sorrow into gladness, fasting into feasting. They shared gifts, cared for the poor, and laughter replaced mourning. From that moment, a festival was established, Purim, so that generations would remember how despair was overturned by deliverance. Not just victory, but survival. Not chance, but divine reversal. In Susa, Mordecai was clothed in royal blue and white, honored across the empire, second only to the king.
Peace for my people. A future for our children.
His name carried weight not of pride, but of loyalty, and Esther's courage whispered through every street, remembered as the queen who risked her life to save her people.
If I perish, I perish. But my people shall live.
Through it all, God's name was never spoken. No prophet thundered. No miracle split the skies. And still, his hand was everywhere, unseen yet undeniable. Perhaps you too are where you are, for such a time as this. Not by accident, not unseen, but chosen, positioned, and called. The God who reversed the fate of a nation still writes stories of redemption today, and yours could be next. The story of Esther closes with triumph, but its echo lives on. An orphan became a queen. A people marked for death found deliverance, and what was meant for their end became their beginning. If this journey stirred your heart, we invite you to walk with us further. Like, share, and subscribe so these stories of faith and courage continue to reach the world. The book is closed, but the author still writes, and the next chapter may be yours.